Thank you, members. Moving back on the file items 72 and 73 pass and retain. Moving to file item 74, that's AB 539. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 539 by Assemblymember Levine, an act relating to search warrants.
Mr. Levine, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 539 will improve boating safety by allowing law enforcement to test the blood of a boater suspected of operating a vessel while under the influence. This is already law for motorists. This bill received unanimous bipartisan support in committee. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Seeing no discussion or debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 76, no 0. Measure passes. Members, moving back to file item 70 by Ms. Campos. That's AB 637. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 637 by Assemblymember Campos, an act relating to resuscitative measures.
Ms. Campos, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. AB 637 would allow nurse practitioners and physician assistants under physician supervision to sign the physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment form. This is a form that already exists, and currently nurse practitioners and physician assistants cannot sign it. It has to be the physician that signs it. This will allow for the nurse practitioners and the physician assistants to be able to meet with the patient and the family to respectfully fill out the form in a timely manner, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Campos. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 70, no 0. Measure passes. Members, moving up to file item 75. That's AB 696. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 696 by Assemblymember Jones-Sawyer, an act relating to criminal procedure.
Mr. Jones-Sawyer, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and colleagues, AB 696 would amend the penal code to allow courts to make a probable cause determination for both out-of-custody as well as in-custody misdemeanor defendants. As the number of misdemeanor cases increases with the passage of Prop 47, the judiciary itself has a vested interest in screening out of custody misdemeanor cases before they become an unnecessary burden on its trial courts. Under this bill, the probable cause determination will be made at the point that the prosecution provides all of its evidence to the defense. AB 696 will identify and weed out weak and baseless cases at an early stage for the benefit of both the court system and the litigants. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Jones-Sawyer. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 54, noes 14. Measure passes. Members, we are going to move briefly back to guest introductions. Mr. Alejo, I believe you have a couple of guests with us today. Mr. Alejo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would like to welcome some special international guests visiting us this morning from the country of Honduras. We have here today the Honduran Mayor Amable de Jesus Hernandez, the Alcalde of Colinas in the Honduran state of Santa Barbara, Vice Mayor Reina Sanchez of Tacoa in the state of Colón, and they are accompanied by Jose Francisco Rodriguez, the president of the Organic Coffee Growers Cooperativa, and Dr. Luther Castillo, who's the co-founder of the first Garifuna People's Hospital. They are here as representatives of the Honduran agricultural, health, and tourism industries. Their stay in Sacramento has been valuable has been a learning opportunity to better market their products and encourage prosperity of their local businesses and communities. For example, in the community of Trujillo, with its beautiful beaches, ecotourism, and internationally certified port, has potential to experience a boom in tourism and economic richness, much like our cities along the California coast. Sonaguera known as the country of oranges, holds a title with the integrity of providing organic quality to consumers, similar to our state's efforts in providing everyone with a healthy and safe alternatives. It is important to share a wealth of knowledge with our Central American brothers and sisters who seek advice on how to best market their products, while also maintaining a standard of living that promotes democracy and economic fairness. It gives me a great pleasure to able to introduce these individuals here on the assembly floor today. Bienvenidos a California, compañeros. Please join me in welcoming them here to our chambers, members.
Members back on the file. File item 76 is pass and retain. File item 77 is AB 1134. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1134 by Assemblymember Mark Stone, an act relating to firearms.
Mr. Stone, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is essentially a cleanup bill. Currently, under the law, in order to issue a permit to carry a concealed weapon, if a member of a city wants to request such a permit, oftentimes the city police chief will send that individual to the sheriff. But the converse is not necessarily true, and there was a recent court case that said, well, the legislature hadn't really spoken, so we're not sure that it can happen. So all this bill does is say that if there's an arrangement between the sheriff and the police chief whereby the sheriff and the police chief both have to agree that the police chief will issue permits to carry a concealed weapon, that is not prevented by this statute. That's the cleanup piece that this bill does, and I ask for your aye votes.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 49, noes 23. Measure passes. File item 78, AB 899. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 899 by Assemblymember Levine and others, an act relating to juveniles.
Mr. Levine, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 899 protects children from improper disclosures of their confidential information. California's confidentiality laws are intended to protect children present and future adverse consequences. Existing law prohibits disclosure and dissemination of juvenile information without explicit authorization from the court. This bill simply reiterates that federal officials, including immigration officials, are not exempt from having to petition the court for access to this information. AB 899 received bipartisan support in committee. Thank you. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
See no discussion or debate on this item. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 71, noes 0. Measure passes. File item 79, pass and retain. File item 80, that's AB 451. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 451 by Assemblymember Bonilla, an act relating to vehicles.
Ms. Bonilla, you may open.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. This bill clarifies that cities and counties have the ability to authorize private parking facility owners to regulate and enforce parking restrictions on their properties under specific conditions established by a local jurisdiction. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Bonilla. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 71, noes 0. Measure passes. File item 81, AB 495. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 495 by Assemblymember Gordon, an act relating to parks.
Mr. Gordon, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Assembly Bill 495 would increase from $25,000 to $50,000 the amount for which the East Bay Regional Park District or the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District may enter into contracts without formalized bid process. Combined, these two districts manage for the public over 180,000 acres of parks and permanent open space. This legislation will save hundreds of hours of staff time and thousands of dollars each year, savings that can dedicate more resources to opening preserves, trails, and other amenities to the public at a much faster pace. This bill passed out of committee with unanimous bipartisan support, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 73, no 0. Measure passes. File item 82, AB 823. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 823 by Assemblymember Bigelow, an act relating to local government.
Mr. Bigelow, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers and members. AB 823, which is sponsored by the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials, allows counties to post an ordinance on the county's website while offering to furnish certified copies of the ordinance to a member of the public if requested. AB 823 is a simple fix that will save time, money, and the administrative office of the county while maintaining transparency for the public. I request humbly an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Bigelow. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 73, no 0. Measure passes. File item 83, pass and retain. File item 84, AB 881. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 881 by Assemblymember Cristina Garcia, an act relating to pupils.
Members, we are going to pass temporarily on file item 84. Moving up to file item 85 will be a pass and retain. File items 87 and 88, pass and retain. Moving up to file item 89, that's AB 494, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 494 by Assemblymember Mainshine and others, an act relating to civil procedure.
Mr. Mainshine, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. Animal abuse is often correlated with family violence, and many people who abuse their family members or intimate partners also threaten, injure, or kill their victims' pets as a way to intensify their abusive habits. AB 494 seeks to bring other sections of state law in line with the Domestic Violence Protection Act by allowing restraining orders to apply to both the person seeking the restraining order and their companion animals. Expanding the protections already provided under domestic violence restraining orders will permit victims of child abuse, sexual assault, stalking, and elder abuse to be better able to protect themselves and their pets when they file for restraining orders. This bill has passed out of the Judiciary Committee with unanimous support, and I respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mainshine. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 76, no 0. Measure passes. Moving back in the file, members, to file item 84, that's AB 881. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 881 by Assemblymember Cristina Garcia, an act relating to pupils.
Ms. Garcia, you may open.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 881 is a follow-up bill to AB 256, which was chaptered into law in 2013. AB 256 simply added cyberbullying into the Education Code of Bullying to give schools the authority to discipline students who participate in these acts with their peers. AB 881 will make one technical change to make sure that students forwarding messages through text or social media are as responsible as those who created it. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 75, no 0. Measure passes. Moving up to file item 90, that's pass and retain. File item 91, also pass and retain. File item 92, that's AB 1520. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1520 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to civil rights.
Mr. Stone, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill and the next two that are on the list are Judiciary Committee bills, and their purpose is in their categories to clean up some of the statutes and the issues that have come up over the years about particular statutes. This bill is to distinguish between two civil rights acts to ensure that as the courts are dealing with cases involving them, that they're very clear about the rights and remedies, and I respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Mr. Wagner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, as the Vice Chair of Judish, let me say this bill as it currently stands is absolutely unobjectionable. The problem is it's our concern that this bill as it currently stands is not what is going to eventually come back to us from the Senate. This and the following bill are merely spot bills. I'd rather see what we're actually going to ultimately be asked to vote on, and that's why I was a no on this committee bill in the committee and will be a no on this measure as well.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Mr. Stone, back to you for your close.
Ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 50, noes 20. Measure passes. Moving to file item 93, AB 1522. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1522 by the Committee on Judiciary and Act relating to real property.
Mr. Stone, you may again open.
Thank you. And again, this is a committee bill that is providing an additional 30 days for the California Research Bureau to complete its work on a report that it is doing to evaluate the nuisance eviction pilot program under Civil Code Section 3485 and 3486. And I ask for your aye votes.
Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 49, noes 18. Measure passes. File item 94, AB 1523. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1523 by the Committee on Judiciary and Act relating to attorneys.
Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this merely is a cleanup of a bill back from 2009 that clarifies some of the provisions in it, and I request an aye vote. Again, this is a committee bill.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 49, noes 20. Measure passes. File item 95, AB 346. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 346 by Assemblymember Wilk and others and Act relating to vehicles.
Mr. Wilk, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. In the state of California, one must carry a valid driver's license in order to operate a vehicle. In the event that one is pulled over in a traffic stop, he or she must present law enforcement with identification. At that time, it is procedurally important to establish the identity of the driver. Recently in my district, an incident occurred during a traffic stop regarding a motorcyclist who refused to remove his tinted helmet. This prevented law enforcement from successfully confirming that the photo on the driver's license was indeed the motorcyclist. A license by itself only provides evidence of the licensee's identity. It does not establish that the driver and the licensee are, in fact, the same person. The act of obstructing one's face from law enforcement is a public safety concern. AB 346 would close this loophole and include that a motorist must provide law enforcement with an unobstructed view of his or her full face upon examination of the driver's license. This legislation does not create a new crime. It simply provides clarification of existing law. This bill gives law enforcement the necessary tool to successfully uphold the law. This measure passed unanimously out of transportation. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Wilt. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 76, noes 1. Measure passes. File item 96, AB 638. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 638 by Assemblymember Frazier and Act relating to vessels.
Mr. Frazier, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 638 seeks to extend the current requirement that children under the age of 13 wear life jackets while a vessel is underway to certain vessels that are longer than 26 feet. Existing law only requires children under the age of 13 to wear a life jacket on a vessel that is underway if the vessel is 26 feet of length or shorter. In the past, most vessels longer than 26 feet were cabin-style vessels, but today, many of the go-fast or cigarette boats exceed that length threshold. These type of vessels can often reach speeds of much more than 80 miles per hour, generally, and they have open cabins. The bill is sponsored by the California State Sheriff's Association and supported by the Recreational Boaters of California. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 73, no 0. Measure passes. File item 97, AB 453. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 453 by Assemblymember Bigelow and Act relating to groundwater.
Mr. Bigelow, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I'm presenting AB 453, sponsored by the Valley Ag Water Coalition, which would authorize an agency to amend an existing groundwater management plan so that it may serve as an alternative plan under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. This particular bill passed out of committee with unanimous bipartisan support on it, and I would encourage an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Bigelow. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 76, noes 1. Measure passes. File items 98 and 99 pass and retain. Moving to Senate third reading. File item 100. Clerk will read.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 32 by Senator Bell and others relative to Autism Awareness Month.
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to present SCR 32, which proclaims April as the Autism Awareness Month and encourages all of our citizens to show support and engagement for those with autism during this month. I'm a principal co-author of this important resolution because of the challenges that we see with the developmental disability that we know and disorder that we know as autism. It is spreading, it is growing. 1 in 68 children in this current year are suffering from various forms of autism. Boys have 4 times the likelihood of getting autism, but there is hope. There is hope that when we have early interventions, really in the first 4 years of life, 3.5 years by statute, but in the first 4 years of life, that we can use therapies and behavioral treatments that will improve healthy outcomes for all children. Unfortunately, in many communities in this state, lack of health access and screening makes it so that in African American and Latino communities, that age is roughly double by the time we recognize autism, roughly 7.5 years old, almost 8 years old. We also see in the African American community, in particular with respect to autism, that we have regression of motor skills and learning skills that have already been gained, whereas in other communities, particularly white children with autism, typically the skills stop, but they don't regress. So we see that there are a number of challenges. We had a select committee on mental and behavioral health meeting and on autism just this past Friday, and we talked about how we look at autism and occurring disorders with respect to mental health and how we want to break silos and not keep developmental delay or disorder separate from mental health, because we know if you have autism, you may suffer from things like anxiety and depression and mood disorder. So we're trying to break the silos and get toward healthy children, well living, and that's what this resolution encourages. I would respectfully request your aye vote, and thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to present this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley Thomas. Mr. Thurman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of SCR 32. As chair of the Assembly's Budget Subcommittee on Health and Human Services, we have had numerous hearings and discussion on a number of developmental disabilities, including autism. Last year, the legislature, and supported by the governor, approved millions of dollars for early awareness and screening for young children in a program called Early Start to ensure that California children get access to information, their families are aware if there is, in fact, a developmental disability like autism. As my colleague has just mentioned, early awareness is one of the keys. And I believe that this resolution and this designation for this month will help to promote awareness throughout the state of California in a way that will be healthy and supportive to the development of California children. And I ask that the members will be willing to support this measure.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. With that, Mr. Ridley Thomas, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I simply thank Mr. Thurman for the dialogue and for allowing this resolution to come forward. All of us know that we've been affected by autism. Maybe at one time we didn't have a name for it. Maybe we didn't understand why someone might be susceptible to activities that didn't make sense or that we couldn't explain in our youth. But we've come to appreciate what the spectrum is. And even things like Asperger's are not in use as much because we recognize that forms of Asperger's disease are now considered to be a part of the autism spectrum. So as science develops, awareness must develop, public policy must change, and we must be responsive to the concerns of all Californians. That's what SCR 32 represents. I would respectfully request that the first row be open for co-authors, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley Thomas. Would you like co-authors on this item, Mr. Ridley Thomas? Members, the first roll will be open for co-authors. The clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors on SCR 32. SCR 32, co-authors, members. The clerk will close the roll. There are 77 co-authors added on SCR 32. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Moving to the consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read the second-day consent calendar.
Assembly Bill 822 by Assemblymember Cooley and Act relating to insurance.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. It's the second-day consent calendar, members. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 77, no 0. The consent calendar is adopted.
Assembly Bill 1511.
Ayes 77, no 0.
Assembly Bill 1512.
Ayes 77, no 0.
Assembly Bill 1513.
Ayes 77, no 0.
Assembly Bill 673.
Ayes 77, no 0.
Assembly Bill 892.
Ayes 77, no 0.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 51.
Ayes 77, no 0.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 29.
Ayes 77, no 0.
And Senate Concurrent Resolution 31.
Ayes 77, no 0. Members, moving back to guest introductions. Mr. Levine, your guests, some of them have arrived.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I am really pleased and honored to have students from Casa Grande High School. They're students in government. They're here to observe the legislature today. They're here with their teacher, Mavis Weir. Please join me in welcoming these students this morning.
We will now move to announcements and adjournments in memory. Request to adjourn in memory. The following members were granted prior permission to speak on an adjournment in memory. Ms. Eggman, you are recognized for your adjournment. Members, please take your seats and direct your attention to Ms. Eggman for her adjournment in memory. Ms. Eggman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to adjourn in memory of Trevor Atkinson, a resident of Stockton. Trevor was born in England in 1932, joined the Royal Air Force, and then immigrated to the U.S. in 1958 into Southern California. He was a draftsman and then a real estate appraiser. And during his time in Southern California and Pasadena, he was surprised at the growth of development and the removal of active farmland down in Southern California at that time. He later moved to Napa, where he worked as a real estate appraiser, and then came to Stockton in 1984. He He was an astronomer as well. He introduced a lot of people to the land of the stars. He held a lot of workshops and took kids out with telescopes so they could dream about where this vast universe could take them. But my best memories of Trevor were of his reasoned advocacy for smart growth. Someone who served on the Stockton City Council, there was a lot of anger and vitriol as we discussed development and discussed our issues around bankruptcy as developers on one side and environmentalists on the other. The conversations were often very difficult. And when Trevor was in the room, you always knew that there was going to be somebody who was going to try to find that balance, to talk about what he really felt as his values, but to do it in a way where people could hear the message. He was always a gentleman. He always looked for that common ground. He and his wife were some of the co-founders of the Campaign for Common Ground. He lost his life on April 1st, and he will forever be remembered in the city of Stockton as somebody who brought that quiet voice of reason where actual debate and dialogue and decisions could be made for the good of the whole. I ask that we adjourn in his memory today.
Thank you, Ms. Eggman. I understand we have the presence of a former member of this House. Former Assembly Member Nancy Skinner has joined us today. Assemblywoman Skinner. Ms. Gonzalez, you are recognized for your adjournment in memory, and members, please direct your attention to Ms. Gonzalez.
Members, today I rise to ask that we adjourn in memory of San Diego area educator and community leader, Mr. Nick Inzunza. Nick Inzunza, the youngest son of 10 children of immigrant farm workers Marina and Ricardo Inzunza, passed away peacefully, surrounded by his wife, children, grandchildren, and over 100 friends and family members. He was 72 years old. Born in Coronado and raised in Old Town National City, Inzunza served as a corporal in the 5th Marine Division during the Vietnam War. Later, he mobilized voter registration campaigns and grassroots efforts protecting the rights and dignity of immigrant workers. He registered thousands of voters in the late 60s and played a major role documenting the San Diego Latino movement. He embraced a philosophy of self-determination, empowering the disenfranchised, serving as one of the first bilingual psychologists in the National School District, and advocating for their children and their families. He was instrumental in South Bay political campaigns for decades and served on the Tijuana Valley County Water District before capping his career of education advocacy by being elected to the South Bay Union School District Board in 2006, serving there until he became too ill to attend meetings in the recent months. Leticia and Nick had 6 children and 6 grandchildren. He is also survived by 8 brothers and sisters and over 100 nephews and grandnephews. He will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Mr. Gordon, you are recognized for your adjournment in memory.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to ask that we adjourn in memory of my constituent and friend, Bob Grimm. Bob died on March 23rd at the age of 88. He was in Tanzania, camping on the Serengeti Plain, when a mini tornado swept through in the middle of the night, overturned his tent, and created massive injuries. He was airlifted to a local hospital with injuries that were not thought to be life-threatening, but the next day he died of cardiac arrest. Bob was born in 1926 in Macon, Missouri. He received his bachelor's and master's degree in engineering from Purdue University. And in 1951, he moved to California to take a role as an executive at a startup company called Hewlett-Packard. He spent 35 years as an executive at Hewlett-Packard. Shortly after arriving in California, he met a young woman who was a graduate student in psychology at Stanford University. He married Marion. They had 4 children. Bob and Marion settled in Los Altos, and they were an active couple in the community. In 1997, Bob and Marion were named the Los Altons of the Year. Marion died in 2008 in their 55th year of marriage. Bob was an accomplished executive at Hewlett-Packard, but he was also the heart and soul of his community. He spent 8 years on the city council with a term as mayor. He served for 20 years on the board of directors of the local United Way and for 2 years as president of the United Way of California. Los Altos has a history museum which would not exist without Bob's efforts and his $10,000 annual contribution to guarantee that free admission to all. He's also credited with being a key leader in starting the San Jose Technology Museum, and he managed their construction project to build the museum in the 1990s. The charter school Downtown College Prep in San Jose and the Los Altos Festival of Lights also bear his signatures. In his recent obituaries, Bob's been described as relentlessly positive, a leader who only spoke when he felt he had something to contribute. He was unfailingly generous, persistent, kind, and rigorous. I first met Bob when I was running for the state assembly for the first time. Los Altos was a new community. I'd never represented them. They were in a different county than the county that I served on the Board of Supervisors. And somebody said, "You've got to meet Bob Grimm." They also told me, "But beware, Bob's a Republican." Bob and I sat down, and we spent an hour having a conversation about life, community service, civic engagement. And at the end of that hour, Bob said, "I want to endorse you and support you because I believe in your values and I believe that you share the values that I have for our community." Bob held a major event that won me great support in the community of Los Altos because of his commitments. I will miss Bob. Our entire community will miss Bob. He's survived by his 4 children, 8 grandchildren, by his good and dear friend Julie Rose, and a grieving community. Thank you for adjourning in the memory of Bob Grimm.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Madam Speaker, you are recognized from your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise today to adjourn in memory and to mourn the passing of 2 San Diego teenagers, Taylor Alessana of Fallbrook and Sage David of Encinitas. From all accounts, they were sweet, loving, and bright young people. They were also transgender, and they both committed suicide.
I might need your help.
Sage and Taylor had friends, they had allies, and they had supportive families. Thank you. Yet they still suffered enough that they took this tragic step. You know, we all know adolescence is tough, but transgender kids face pressures that I don't know that any of us, even with our experience and obviously my lack of psychological armor, can handle. Studies show that LGBT youth are more vulnerable to suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts than other young people, and more likely to be victimized by threatening or bullying behavior, as Taylor was. As transgender people of all ages suffer disproportionate discrimination and violence in our society, all Taylor and Sage wanted was to feel safe at school and in the community and to belong. And that's not too much for any kid to ask for. I hope that we can honor Taylor and Sage by inspiring young people and their parents, our peers, to be kinder and more accepting of those who are different in any manner. And anyone tempted to mock or marginalize transgender Californians should stop and think what that action could mean to a more vulnerable young person. We can also honor Taylor and Sage by helping adults become more aware of signs that a teenager is considering such a drastic step. There are suicide hotlines and LGBT youth helplines, and I would hope we could all make sure that our constituents are aware of those resources. I know the families and friends and allies of Sage and Taylor are really hurting, and they're in our thoughts and our prayers today. And I want to thank you for allowing me an emotional moment to adjourn today in memory of 2 incredibly sweet kids.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Wood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise today to ask that we adjourn in the memory of Dr. Robert Bob Gillis, a Sacramento prosthodontist who provided dental care in the Sacramento area for nearly 37 years. Bob was a friend and a colleague, but you may be wondering, what is a prosthodontist? Well, a prosthodontist is a dental specialist who tackles the most difficult, challenging restorative dental cases that are out there, the toughest of the tough. When a general dentist like myself can't handle a case, we go to a prosthodontist, and Bob was one of the great ones. So he was active in our local, state, and national dental organizations. He was a diplomate of the American Board of Prosthodontics, a member of the Sacramento Dental District Society, the California Dental Association, of which he was a trustee, American Dental Association. He was also a fellow of the American College of Dentists, which is an organization that honors the top 3% of all dentists in the nation for high ethical standards and contributions to the profession of dentistry. He also served as the past president and distinguished member of the Sacramento District Dental Society and the Foundation Board of Directors. He began the Smiles for Big Kids program, which provided pro bono services, dentures, and surgery to elderly population as well as other adults who were often missed through our regular dental care system. He was most proud of his work restoring the facial structure of cancer patients who lost their smiles due to multiple surgeries. Dr. Gillis was an artist at heart and loved working through these challenges. His most recent venture was serving on the board of directors of the Maxillofacial Foundation and the Sacramento District Dental Foundation. His love for his family, his profession, and his colleagues was always evident and inspirational. He will be dearly missed. My sincere thoughts and prayers are with his family and daughter, his daughter Mary Lou, his daughter Beth, and his entire family. I ask that we adjourn in the memory of Dr. Robert Gillis today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Members, please bring the names to the desk to be printed in the journal. All requests to adjourn in memory will be deemed read and printed in the journal. The session schedule is as follows. Friday, April 17th, no floor session, no check-in session. Monday, April 20th, floor session at noon. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. Seeing and hearing no further business, I am ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Holden moves. Ms. Waldron seconds that this House stands adjourned until Monday, April 20th at noon. Quorum call is lifted.